Okay, today we are looking at common factoring. And the big idea with common factoring is to look at what is common, which is why we call it common factoring. So what does this really mean? We're looking at what is the same. That is the key here. You want to take a look at a list of numbers and variables and try to figure out, okay, what do I have that is in common here? So for instance, if I had 3x squared plus 15x, we would be able to figure out, okay, what is the same between this term and this term? And we break it up into two things. First, you look at the numbers or the coefficients. And then after you're done with the numbers, then you'll look at the variables. So let's just break this down and start with step one, looking at the numbers. 3 and 15, is anything the same between them? And when we say same, we mean can the same number be divided evenly into both 3 and 15? And the answer to that for sure is yes. Well, 3 goes in evenly to both the numbers 3 and 15. So what we can do is we can take a 3 out of both 3 and 15. That is going to be our largest common factor. The way you figure that out, sometimes it's nice and easy. Like here, it's not too bad, but sometimes the numbers get a little big. So what you do is you can just make a little list. So for the number 3, what numbers go into 3? Well, we have the numbers 1 and we have the number 3. And what about the number 15? Well, what goes into that? Well, we have 1 times 15 will give us 15, and 3 times 5 will give us 15, and I don't know if there's anything else, so I think that's it. And then you take a look at your list and you say, okay, well, what's the biggest number? There's always going to be a 1 there. Those we don't really care about, but we look at the biggest number and we say, yep, the biggest number is 3. And that's kind of how we ended up with this 3 when we break it down. So we have the numbers done. Let's take a look at our variables. We look at our variables. This thing has an x squared, which means it really has x times x. And this thing just has an x. So is there a way to take a variable out of both? Well, yeah. They are both able to be divided by x. So I'm going to take an x out of this as well. I'll just change that back to red. I'm going to take an x out of this as well. Good. So what does that leave me with? If I look at my first term here, I've taken a 3 out of it. So 3 divided by 3 is just going to be a 1. And then I had x squared. I took an x out of it. What am I left with? Well, I'm just left with x. On the other side, I have 15. I took a 3 out of it. So 15 divided by 3 is going to give me 5. And then I had x. I took an x out of it, so I'm not actually left with anything. So that would be factored. Here's what I took out. Here's what I am left with. The only thing that we kind of don't like doing is just putting that 1 there. Let's just erase that. And that would be factored appropriately, which is perfect. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing. We're looking at what is the same and then taking it out. So we can also do a little check. And how we do that is we can redistribute this in. And if we do, we should end up with our original equation. So if we wanted to check, we could go 3x times x, that's 3x squared, plus 3x times 5, which is 15x, and those two things are the same, so we are good. Let's look at another example. Here we have 4x squared plus 8x, and we're going to do the first things first. We're going to start with our numbers. So this and this, what can we factor out of both? Well, let's make a little list. So for the number 4, we know that 1 times 4 is going to do it. And what else is going to multiply to it? 2 times 2. Okay. And for 8, well, we know that 1 times 8 is going to do it. And then other ways to get to 8, well, we can go 2 times 4. So let's take a look at our list and figure out what's the greatest common factor there. Well, it looks like 4 and 4 are going to be our biggest. So we know that we're taking out a 4 from both terms. And then you have to ask, can I take out a variable? Variable, well, this has x squared, this has x, so we can definitely take out an x from both. So here is my term that I've factored out. And now what I'm going to do, 4 divided by 4 is going to be 1. X squared, and I took an x out of it, is just going to leave me with an x, plus 8 divided by 4, it's going to give me 2, and then x divided by x, well, I just took that x out, it's gone. So this would be the completed factor there. And then we can also make this happen with more than just 2 terms. Sometimes you get 3, 4, 6. You just have to find what's common between all of them. So let's look at this one. So we'll start off with our numbers again. So let's make our list. 3. What multiplies to 3? Well, we have 1 and 3. What multiplies to 12, which is our next number? Well, we know that 1 and 12 is going to make it happen. We also know that 2 times 6 is going to make it happen, and 3 times 4. So there's a lot of factors of 12. And what about 18? Well, for 18, we know that 1 and 18. We could also go 2 times 9, or we can go 3 times 6. So what is the greatest common factor? It has to be common between all of them. Well, the biggest one in 3 is 3, so 12 also has a 3, and 18 has a 3. And you might be tempted to say, well, what about this 6 here? Well, those two have it, but this one doesn't, so it does not work. It has to be common between all of them. So the biggest one we have is 3. Then we look at variables. This thing has an x squared, perfect. This thing has an x, good, we can take out the x, but this thing does not, which means you cannot take out a variable. It has to be common between all of your terms. So for variables, we can't take it out. The only thing we could take out is a 3. So we'll go through, we'll divide all the numbers by 3. So we had 3x squared, we took out a 3, we're just left with x squared. Minus, and then we had 12x, took out a 3, we're left with 4x. Plus 18, we took out a 3, so 18 divided by 3 is going to give us 6. And that is where we're at. Okay. The other thing we can do is sometimes you'll see word problems where we're looking at, maybe they'll give you something like this. They'll give you a gigantic rectangle and they'll say, okay, the area is 3x squared plus 27x. And they'll say, okay, well, what are the dimensions? So we want to know, what is my length? What is my width? And if I'm doing that, I know that my area equals length times width. So if I factor out my area, I'll see what 2 things were multiplied together to give me that. So let's break this down, let's do a little example, and we will see exactly what our dimensions are of this rectangle. So here, I know that the thing I'm trying to factor is 3x squared plus 27x. So look at my numbers, 3, 27. So what multiplies to 3? 1 and 3. What multiplies to 27? We have 1 and 27, and I think we just have 3 and 9. So now, if we are trying to figure out what's the greatest common factor, well, the biggest one here is 3, and we have a 3 there, so we're good. So we can definitely take out a 3. So I've taken out a 3, and can I take out any variables? This thing has an x squared, this thing has an x. They both at least have an x, so I can take out an x there. So 3 divided by 3 is just going to give me 1, and x squared, I've taken out an x, so I'm just left with x over here. Plus 27 divided by 3 gives me 9, and x divided by x, well, can't really do anything with that. So these are my dimensions. This could be my length. This could be my width. And the question might even go further and say, what is the area if x equals 2? Okay? So if that is the case, I know my expression for area is 3x, x plus 9. I can just substitute in that 2, 3 times 2, and then I have my brackets here, and then I have 2 plus 9. So all I've done there is just substitute my x for 2, and I get 6 times 2 plus 9, which is 11, and I would get 66. And that's all because we were able to factor and figure out what is my length, what is my width. And that is as easy as it is. Now, it's very important to get these basics down, especially making your list of factors, because we're going to be using that an awful lot when we look at factoring simple trinomials, which is the next step. Okay, so make sure you have this skill down, practice it, and make sure you're getting your quizzes done.